We're on.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Today we're having another, what we think is a good session with the Three Consulting Amigos, and we're going to be extending on with the model that we presented last week with Ed and Ron, talking about how do you develop a meaningful exit plan. And to help us kind of set the stage for the conversation that we're having today, in which I'll be doing some talking, I wanted Ed to kind of go over the whole exit planning strategy, and specifically the 8 drivers, to give us a better understanding of where we're going and why each of these is so important. So having said that, Ed, do you mind taking us through the 8 drivers in the exit planning process? And then I'll just go ahead and kind of add what I've learned from my own experience in my area of expertise.
Yeah,
Sure.
Ed, pull your camera up just a little bit so we can see you. Ed, move your camera up or down. There we go. Perfect.
Well, thank you, Ray. We'll start off a little bit about a real quick summary from last week's meeting, where we talked about how important it was to have an exit plan in place for your business so that you could optimize the price of your business and sell it to who you want to sell it to, and on your terms and on your time frame. And in doing so, one of the biggest aspects of an exit plan is to optimize the value of your company. And we come up with 8 value drivers, and I'm going to just real briefly go over them real quickly here. And today's program is going to be Ray Anderson primarily digging into how to increase efficiency, quality, and productivity, one of the 8 value drivers. But real briefly, the value drivers kind of encompass a comprehensive plan of the whole business. One of them is the market potential, the stickiness of your customers, grow revenue and margin. Those are all top line related. And then we get into some the expense part, which Ray will be talking about, and that's increasing efficiencies. Another driver is to invest in high ROI projects that really add value to the company, worthwhile investments. Another one that is many times forgotten about is how to optimize your balance sheet and your cash flow, which is really one of the most important parts and one of the most important drivers of driving value in your business. And you have to be mindful of opportunities out there in the marketplace, which is investigate M&A possibilities and potential partnerships. And one of the biggest factors we always talk about is that you have to have some type of an ongoing review on how well you are doing meeting your strategic plan. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Ray, who really has a lot of experience in working with frontline people, working with management, and trying to find ways of improving communication between frontline and management so that everybody is on the same page and everybody's focused on driving results for the company. So Ray, would you mind taking us through some of your playbook on how you do this?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And I think, thank you, Ed. One of the things that makes this group, this Three Consulting Amigos, valuable is that Ron really has a tremendous amount of knowledge and understanding about the first 3. And, you know, if you don't have a good market and you defined it clearly, and if you don't have sticky customers, which means customers who want to stay, you know, you can't grow your revenue and your margins, you know. But once you've got in there, you know, the thing that makes, I think, this whole process meaningful is the fact that each one of us, and as a small business is trying to grow out of its restrictions based on time of the owner, etc., they need to have resources that can help them move to the next level. And one of the ones that I think has been most underutilized, the people who actually work there. And I've referred to this in the past as kind of, most businesses have what I call a fiefdom syndrome. And what I mean by that, this is a medieval concept, but we all know the Lord of the Manor is the guy who determines everything that happens, including the life and death of his serfs. And the serfs know it's not their place to say anything to the manor and the Lord, because that's not their job. And frankly, that's what I see too many times as I work inside of organizations. People at the front line don't say anything, even though they know something is going on that may or may not be beneficial for them and the organization, but they don't think it's their place to make something happen. So I believe that one of the things that we as a team have been able to do, and Ed and I specifically have worked together to be able to shift the sense of what leadership needs to do to engage its front line and bring them into the conversation. Because basically, if you've got 15 people or 100 people, those are an infinite resource of minds that may be able to move you from where you are to where you want to go, particularly with regard to efficiency, productivity, and quality. So, I'm going to be talking a little bit about that. But before I do that, I want to connect with Ron a little bit from his own experience in terms of how he's seen, getting those top three going. And part of that process is engaging the marketing and sales people so that they're involved and they're aligned too. Has that been part of your experience, Ron?
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. A lot of times people think, well, the marketing and sales, group, they're who they are, and you hire people who know how to sell, and then maybe you throw in a design person in there, and you got a marketing team, and that's not the way it actually works well. There are companies that happen to be in the right niche that can get by with that. But companies that are in a highly competitive environment really cannot get by with that. And you need to have a team. And one of the interesting things about running a marketing team is that you have a very diverse group of people. First of all, you have to have the strategic side. Your top marketing person needs to be sitting right next to the president and the CFO, because they're when you take a look around these drivers here, so many of these are marketing functions. You've listed the three of them, but also forecast and reevaluation. Forecasting comes out of the sales department because they're the ones who are closest to the customers. And then the other side of that is customer service. A lot of people think customer service is something different. No, it's marketing. It's customer facing. And so marketing ought to be running the customer service department as well. A lot of times it's an extension of the accounting department or the office management department. But the truth of the matter is if they touch a customer in any way, shape, or form, they're providing a marketing function. And so when you take a look at the very broad issue of marketing and distribution, surprisingly, if you put it all together, as much as 40% of the cost is actually a marketing function in, say, a manufacturing operation. So it's a lot bigger than you think when you actually put these other customer-facing people there. So you're dealing with strategic planning, data. Today, a lot of data science is required in order to do a good marketing plan. And therefore, you have to have good strategic understanding. And then in addition to that, you do have to have the salespeople, and those are certain personalities. Customer service, a different kind of a personality. So, and then the creatives. A lot of people who masquerade as marketing people are really designers, or they're really ad people, or they're really PR people. They call themselves marketing because they would like to be included in the whole thing, but they're not. They're specialists within the marketing umbrella. So the interesting part about managing that kind of a group is it is incredibly diverse, and you need different personality profiles to fit the different kinds of jobs that there are. That's a challenge in and of itself. But in addition to that, when you're successful in marketing, the experience I have had is that my clients grow. And when the clients grow, they hire people. And when they hire people, they have more problems. And so trying to get all of this to work together is a major problem. So yeah, I've had to deal with all kinds of personnel problems, even as a marketing guy, and strategic planning. because I felt as though I would lose the business if I didn't fix the problem. So I've brought others in, including you, Ray, and to try and fix personal problems where they've hired the wrong people into the wrong jobs, and trying to get service to work better. And you run into these problems when you have a goal to increase efficiency and increase quality. Those are all those are drivers for your business, but they're also drivers for marketing.
Right.
If we can't get these things done, the marketing's not going to work either. So,
Right.
yeah, it's a big deal, and it's all integrated in the overall organization.
Well, I think, having said that, one of the neat things that I'm trying to create an umbrella so everybody realizes that when you increase efficiencies, productivity, and quality, it literally is a team effort, and everybody has to be aligned with that. And I think that's one of the challenges. And Ed, I'd like your input, because basically one of the values that Ed brings, he's not only a financial guy, but finance alone, without having a way of being able to bounce that off of what's going on operationally, is kind of meaningless, And so the challenge that I think most organizations have is, how do you distribute information in such a way that everybody gets it and understands where we're going? Because, when we do a no-collar workforce, and the idea is that, we're trying to eliminate this notion that, hey, if I'm a white-collar person, I know things, and if I'm a blue-collar person, I know things, and we don't work together. But the truth is that when you have a no-collar workforce, everybody understands there's one simple goal, and that is to achieve the goals of the organization overall, so that when you move forward, everybody knows what their role is and what they do. Whether you're a shipping clerk or you're the finance guy, everybody is working together. And I think our experience, and I'd like your feedback on that, Ed, since we've had the pleasure of working together. What happens when everybody starts moving in alignment?
Well, the results become really impactful when everybody's on the same page, moving in the right direction. And it starts with a strategic plan, a strategic vision with strategic goals. And the next part of it is very, very important, and that is the accountability. People have to be held accountable for what they sign up for. That's important for moving the company forward. And then you get into situations where you have communication between departments, between the front line and management. You have to have transparency where your guys are everybody's telling the truth. There are no secret agendas. There are no water cooler comments being made that are contrary to where we need to go. And there's got to be a common scorecard that everybody's being evaluated on. So it's all kind of works together. And you can say also that it really ties into the company culture. When you dig down deep, Ray, and you're talking to people on the front lines, you're learning a lot about company culture. Right. Some company culture is good, some of it isn't. And you try to refine it so that it really produces the results that you want to produce. And as they say a lot of times, the culture is more important than strategy in a lot of cases, because you got to move forward. And
I think one of the neatest things I heard, somebody said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And we've certainly seen that, having worked together. The problem is that sometimes people, and Ron, you kind of alluded to this, sometimes people are so powerful, either in their personality or the method by which they communicate, that other people don't even feel like they can ask a question, or if they do, it's squashed, so they don't say anything. And the challenge that we've seen is that when that happens, you don't get access to information that you need. And in my own personal experience, I've seen CEOs make decisions based on what they thought was the information they needed, and they literally only had half the information required to make the right decision because people were withholding it. Sometimes for what I call benign compliance, which means I don't want to say anything and I'm just comfortable here, and other times because they were afraid. And so the issue is that, how do we get everybody aligned so that they understand what they need to do to get and keep customers? And the truth is, whether you're a shipping clerk or you're in the production or you're in the office on accounting, all of you have a role to play, and your customers will appreciate it if you understand what that role is. The second thing is, how do we teach the relevant skills that the people need to be able to help that and grow in their leadership skills? And my feeling is that leadership isn't something that happens in the executive suites. You know, there's always people who are leaders at every level of the organization, and our job is to be able to draw them out. And I know whenever we've done that, we've been able to get people to develop their skills personally, but more importantly, it makes them feel like they're a part of something that's really meaningful. And then, you know, you want to be able to fix systems instead of fixing the blame. When you have a culture, and you kind of alluded to this, when you got a culture in which people are afraid or they're uncomfortable, they will fix the blame as opposed to the problem. And when that happens, you know, instead of getting things done, what you need to get done, we have people scurrying around and hiding things, and it's like cockroaches, right? So, you know, these are all kind of all connected together, whether you're in the marketing end, you're in the finance and operations, or you're at the front line. You know, the key is you got all these incredible brains, and in every organization, most of them are not either engaged with you. They come in, they turn them off when they walk in the door, and when they leave, they turn them back on. And it's really a kind of a tragedy because we have this opportunity to use it. So when we're looking at efficiencies, and we get everybody to realize that what we can do is focus on reducing costs and increasing productivity. And the data that we have indicates that literally on your labor dollars, you could probably take about 30% of all your labor dollars, bring them out into a bucket in the parking lot, and light them on fire. I mean, that's how badly they're being used. What do we do about getting them effectively used and move them forward? And Ed, you know, as a point of reference here, when we were working together on a client, we had to deal a little bit with leadership that was intimidating. Not good or bad, that happens in every organization. The hard part is getting leadership to appreciate and understand that they're having an impact that they hadn't intended. You know, I've found that people aren't necessarily mean-spirited as much as they are unaware of the impact they have. Having shifted in that particular case and other ones I've been at, all of a sudden people feel free, they start expressing themselves, and they'll ask for little things. And I remember I was in a plant one time, and the place was an absolute mess. You know, they were making windows, and the vinyl was literally a half an inch across the floor all over. And big on the wall was the signs, safety and cleanliness are important to our business. And so I says, you know, hey guys, you know, why don't you clean this up? And the guy looked at me and says, we don't have a broom. You know, so I mean, sometimes it's as simple as being able to hear them and give them time to be able to do what's necessary to clean things up, because when they're free to be able to spend a little time at the front end getting things right, they're more productive on the back end. And one of the things that I've run into, and I don't know how you guys feel about that, but somehow we get locked in this idea of activities being as important as results. Hey, I was here for 8 hours. I was doing my job for 8 hours. And we all know as businessmen that has nothing to do with what you want to accomplish. If you've got them engaged in something and say, this is the result we want, we need 97% quality, we need higher productivity, we got to increase it by 20%, we need you to help us figure out how to reduce costs. I have never been in a place where they wouldn't and couldn't come up with some ideas and start raising their hand because they're saying, well, gee, I've got this idea. Well, how come you didn't bring it up? I was uncomfortable, you know, my supervisor gave me a hard time, you know, whatever it is, our job is to be able to reduce those conflicts and be able to get people to communicate more effectively, which ends up in higher productivity.
It's interesting, sort of on that point, it's interesting. I had a conversation this morning with one of my sons, and he's a supervisor of about six people, and they've been working at home because of COVID. And it's interesting how it's so easy for business leaders to kind of fall into a structured atmosphere because they're forced to by the government. So here was a situation where I said, well, now you working the same as you did before? How's your productivity? Oh yeah, I work more at home and I'm saving 3.5 to 4 hours a day. And so I'm working an extra half hour, maybe an hour a day. giving it back to the company just because I get to work at home. What about the rest of your guys? Are they putting in a full day? Oh yeah, absolutely. Everybody's putting in 8 hours a day. And then I said, well, if everybody put in just a little bit more time, maybe you could go to your boss and, make the case. Well, and then immediately it's like, oh no, they can't put in more than 8 hours. That's illegal. Well, it's not really illegal. They're on salary as professionals. It's a professional group of writers, but because they believe that you have to pay overtime, and I believe that the law says you have to pay overtime based on the hours you report. We're forced in these structures, and so I think sometimes you've got leaders who are trying to stay within a structure that's imposed upon them by government, and therefore you have a tendency to push people into roles. And it's really hard for leaders to back off, as you suggest, and say, wait a minute, we want to listen to you. We want to have ideas that are going to make this better. But by the same token, you need to understand that we're living within a whole set of rules that the government imposes upon us with the idea that you're being properly paid. So the employer doesn't have an opportunity to give them more freedom, in a sense, because the employee is always penalized for working too much. And so they put down 8 hours, but they're really working 7.5, or they're working 8.5. And so so now the good part about that is that when they take a look at their quality, quality levels and their productivity levels, they've actually increased productivity 5 to 15% during COVID. And that's the argument he'll use in order to try and get to them. But his bosses are always like, that's just not the way we want it. We want to see all you guys here in the office. We're paying for office space for you. It's like the leadership just is not interested in hearing these people, even though they're all white collar workers. They're all degreed people. They're intelligent. And some of them, like my son, have been in other leadership positions. So it's not as though they're talking to dummies, and they're still having trouble getting leadership to listen to creative ideas and frontline experiences.
Well, I think that's a real good point. And Ed, I know that you've experienced that yourself. The truth is, we all get stuck in kind of a role. And yes, there are rules imposed on us by the outsides, whether it's the government, it's customers, or whatever. And the truth is, one of the best books I read is Stephen Covey's son wrote Growing at the Speed of Trust, in which he seriously talked about, when trust goes up, speed to market goes up and costs come down. When trust goes down, speed to market slows up and costs go up. So a lot of what you're saying, Ron, is very true. So the question is, there's this balance point. Good leaders are always trying to figure out how can I get my culture to respond to me? How can I get them involved? How can I grow the trust so they feel what I'm doing is in their best interest? And what I've learned is that when people do that, they will give you the benefit of the doubt. They'll work harder and they'll just say, look, I'm going to do whatever I can to help move the organization forward because we're a team. And that's what you really want to get to. How do we develop a team which is different than a group? A group is simply 4 different golf carts out on the course, and they're each in 4-man teams. At the end, they compile their score and say, well, here's what it was. Where a team is, how do we make this all work together? How do we take my role and your role and avoid the silos? And so a lot of what we're trying to do is pull down the silos, get people to communicate more effectively. And so part of what I want to talk about here as we move forward, Ed and I did this when we were working at this other company. I know you have too. You have spoken to me over and over again about the importance of some of your client meetings. How when one of your clients had a brain tumor, everybody kind of stepped up and tried to fill in the gap for that, including you're going outside as one of his advisors to say, hey, what can we do? Now that was beyond your scope of work, Ron. And the point is that when we are working in an organization and it's a team, the scope of work is getting it done. Right. And getting it done right, on time, complete. And, you know, when Ed and I were working in this organization, it's a contracting firm, you know, everybody's kind of concerned, as we've talked sometime, about, do we really want to share the money with these guys? Because basically they'll know what's going on. It's kind of like they all look and say, yeah, every day we get the contract. We know exactly how much they're making. But it's okay for us because we make good money. You know, we know that they put this together. We wouldn't be making this money if these guys hadn't spent the time to put this together. You know, so it's a matter of honoring one another and saying, hey, you know, I'm here because I want to work in this team. I'm looking forward to being able to learn the skills that can improve the efficiency and the productivity of the organization. And one of the things that we do that I think is important, I've only had a couple of clients do it, but I know from having worked inside other organizations, is a daily meeting. And the purpose of the daily meeting is to have all the key people to sit down together with one express purpose, is like, what do we have to get out the door today to make sure it happens? And is there anything missing? Do we have any consumables missing? Is anything happening? Can we do something to make this more effective? So the point is that in itself improves productivity. But what it doesn't do, and this is the point that Ed was talking about, is if the culture is still bad, that daily production meeting will only solve one problem and we'll still be fixing the blame as we move forward. So we have to do something deeper. And I think part of what we're trying to do is how do we really increase the buy-in for what is really going on? Is it meaningful on a daily basis to say, not only are we going to go over the numbers for the organization and we're going to find out whether we can meet all of them, or do we have a client that says, you know, he had his order come in today, but, you know, we're going to have to put him off one day because we got another order for a bigger customer. And how do we manage through that? And how do we get it to move forward? When you do that, you know, people get involved. And, you know, we were working with this window company. In a matter of a year and a half, we went from 15 million to almost 50 million in sales. And we got an increase of from 300 windows to 1,200 windows a day. I mean, that's an enormous gain with only a 25% increase in labor. You know, and that was in part because we had a team. Everybody was working together, and we had these daily meetings, and people knew what they were supposed to do and what had to be done. And we went from being behind schedule, 45 days, in 6 months, we were on schedule with all their clients. And that was simply by gaining everybody's confidence and making sure that everybody felt like they were a part of a team as opposed to working in isolation. You know, so those are examples. And Ed, with your permission, can you give us some indication from your experience? Because when you first started at the company you worked there for many, many years, you were losing money, correct?
That's correct.
And as time moved on, you were making lots of money. Explain to us, if you can, the role of you as a manager of people, how you were able to engage them in such a way as to shift from a loss to a massive gain.
Well, a big part of that transformation was an increase in productivity. And the productivity starts with better understanding what your frontline people are doing. And there's a very famous management study that was done back in the 30s at Western Electric, where they try to measure productivity. And they thought that by improving the lights, they would see an improvement in productivity. So they made a big investment in getting extra lights in the production area, and they saw the productivity going up. Well, one day there was a mistake and the lighting went back to the way it was, and the productivity kept going up. And they even lowered the lights and the productivity kept going up, which shows the importance of paying attention to what people do on the front line, having a transparency with them so they know what the goals are, what's expected out of them, and measure results so that they all can see it. So you're paying attention to people, they're your frontline folks doing the work. And with that, you can find opportunities for cutting out steps in the process, having a more efficient reporting process so there's less layers of management involved. And all of this combined can have a tremendous improvement in your productivity. And that's what it's all about. So that means you have to have a culture in place where the top managers of the company have to be willing to hear what's going on from people on the front line. And sometimes people will say, well, managers will say, well, they're just complaining, or this isn't true. But in reality, when people go out and do a job and they don't have the right tools, guess what?
Yeah,
That costs you a lot of unproductive time. When
right.
you set up a machine 5 or 6 times during the day because you don't have the right number of people and the equipment doesn't work, guess what? Productivity goes down the drain. So paying attention to your front line is extremely important. And that's what your role has been, Ray. You have spent a lot of time out in the trenches, working with people, developing relationships, where in a lot of cases, the management should have been doing that. But unfortunately, sometimes people don't want to talk to their manager because they don't have the relationship that they need to be able to tell them the truth. So having somebody come in and do an analysis and communicate that feedback up the organization can be extremely liberating and really have an impact on productivity. And then working with the top guys, trying to get them to understand, hey, feedback is like gold. It's money in your checkbook. You gotta listen to it. It hurts, but the results can be so liberating and so fascinating and so much of an improvement to your productivity. It's worth the investment. It's bringing the company culture so that everybody's looking at the same results with the same goals, and being able to communicate even when it hurts.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's, to be able to receive feedback in a way that doesn't become defensive is one of the hallmarks of being an effective leader. The real truth is when a leader is able to take feedback, which may in fact be negative or difficult, and be able to absorb it and not react to it, it makes a huge difference because people feel like they've been listened to. And I think that was the point that you were making. And when people feel like they're listened to, they will produce. And Ron, to your point, I know that your son's been working in this company as a writer. It's like, how do you measure that? But even within that, if they're enthused and they're excited and they feel like they're being supported, they perform at a much higher level than if they're not. And so when you're in a small manufacturing company, as a point of reference, and I have a client that really has executed this amazingly well. But in addition to the 15 minutes a day that they spend going over the numbers, okay, what do we have to get out today? What do we have to do that? They have another 15 minutes of personal development in which they literally go over either a business book or a personal development book and say, hey, what are we doing here? Have you ever read Good to Great? Or have you read, there's a great book out here called 2 Second Lean. And they literally spend 15 minutes talking about what that means and asking people for engagement. In addition to that, every day, the leadership of that daily meeting rotates among frontline workers. So it's not management saying it, because then it becomes a burden. Instead, it's an opportunity to develop the leadership of these frontline people. And they became, initially, they were scared. And you would know this, Ron, or Ed, you ask somebody to do leader or do a presentation and they go apoplectic, right? But the truth is, after a while, they became understanding that I'm becoming a leader. I'm learning how to do this. And, that's the goal, is what we're really trying to do. It's the only infinite resource we have in a business is the minds of the people we have there. And the more effectively we engage them, the better off we are. So, that's kind of why this efficiency thing starts with being able to recognize and understand that your greatest resource is people. And if you use them effectively, they will produce numbers that will blow you out of the water.
Ray, you started to touch on something, I think, in that comment about leaving the 15 minutes to do additional training or to develop leadership. Talk a little bit about the problems we have today in terms of getting smaller individual companies to get their workforce trained. I've been involved with Manufacturers Council of the Inland Empire, and they're involved with a nice organization called InTech that does a lot of training, and they have tried their best to coordinate between the needs of the manufacturers and the training of the individual people to take those positions. So those are for skilled jobs. But I have this sense that most smaller companies, and by that I mean maybe under 200 employees, have a very lackadaisical viewpoint of how they're going to develop their workforce. Nowadays, they kind of come to expect they expect the university system to develop their managers and their engineers. They expect junior college to develop a variety of people. They expect these kinds of workforce development issues to create all their skilled people, and they don't do any work themselves to train people to bring them along. That is quite different, I think, than the way it was 50 or 75 years ago, where you learned from the bottom up and people taught you the things you needed to know so you could come along. I do know that there are a lot of systems out there and programs out there that employers can use to help offset some of the costs for training. Talk a little bit about some of those.
Yeah, I think, that's a real good segue, Ron, for two reasons. One is that, I think, as we mentioned last week, I've had people say, well, I don't want to train people. If I train them, they'll leave. And I said, do you really want them to stay without training? Because, the real experience that I've had, and I think we all have, is that, if you don't treat them well, the good ones leave and the bad ones stay. And what we want is the other way around, in which turnover is low because everybody says, you got to work here. This is like, I've never been in a place like this. And so part of the training issue is that some people can't afford it. The smaller the company is, the more I've had people complain, we don't have time for that. We got work to do. And here's what's astounding. And I don't know if you've had the same experience, but when you do more training, you could spend an hour of training a day and your productivity would increase dramatically over the remaining 7 hours. So it's not a matter of cost, it's a matter of understanding the value. It's not what something costs, it's what it pays. And how do we get people to shift that mindset? So one of the things you talked about, each of these community colleges in our area, whether it's Norco, it's Intech, or San Bernardino Valley College, has training that they offer at no cost to the employee. That if you're doing longer term training, if you want to train somebody how to be a welder, if you want to train somebody to be better at safety, you can send them and you can get this training done at no cost to you. And the truth is, as you know, Ron, this is all paid for anyway. There's a small portion that comes out of your payroll every week. It's called the employment training tax. And it's only 0.1%, but it generates anywhere between $50 and $80 million a year in this economy in California. Everybody who's in manufacturing, construction, and certain other key trades is eligible to get that money back. The easiest way is to be able to go to a community college and say, hey, can you help me here? And they'll say, yeah, we got 7 programs. You can go to Intech, as you pointed out, from Chaffee College, or you can go to San Bernardino Valley College. So it becomes a lot easier for people to have access to training like that. In addition, some of the bigger companies, if they have over 25 employees, we can get them money to offset the cost of training internally, so that the biggest issue for them is we don't have time for this, if we don't have money, can be addressed because there's already a mechanism available in the state to be able to help them achieve that. And as you pointed out, Ed, once you start engaging people and they feel free to say things, it starts this momentum that is hard to stop. They will come up with more and more ideas because basically everybody wants to be involved. Everybody wants to be a part of something meaningful. So, that's an element of this that really makes sense. So thanks for bringing it up, Ron. And, we have, if people want more information, we can always give them additional information as to how to access these funds or who to call and find out what's available in the way of training.
Right. Give everybody your website so that they can find you.
Yes. They can reach me at andersonbusinesscoaching.com or at my email, which is ray@andersonbusinesscoaching.com. So, I wanted to say I have 5 principles of good-hearted leadership that are kind of relevant. You guys kind of understand them, but I want to share them. And the first one, obviously, is how do we get everybody to see the vision that makes sense to them. You know, where are we going and how are we going to get there and what's my role in it? Do I have a role to play in this? And if so, will somebody let me do it? Will I be permitted to be able to actually participate and be heard? I mean, that's one of the biggest things. The second element of this is relevant skills. And to your point, Ron, I am always astounded, and tell me if this isn't true. You guys know it, and I don't know if it was like this where you worked at. But what happens too many times is the training is you come in and Jose says, okay, I'm going to pass you on to this host B, and he's going to teach host C. And I mean, it's just amazing how little training is done, and people stand around and say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And when you look at Toyota as an example, and everybody who knows that the Toyota production system is one of the most effective in the world, they spend a month in training before they ever walk into any production. Can you imagine going into any American manufacturer and say, we're going to keep your guy out of work for a month so we can teach him how to do the job? When the easiest thing to do is to be able to just say, get to work, you know? So, I mean, it's a major, major challenge in terms of relevant skills. Third thing is meaningful incentives and standards. And part of what Ed was talking about, and I think you've seen too, Ron, you know, when you demonstrate a value in the person, you recognize them and you say, geez, you're doing a good job, or how could we do this differently? What's your opinion? How would you like to help us? You know, people want to be involved. And the more we involve them, the more they're going to listen to us. And so, you know, it's really important that we get that third piece out there that's important. And then we get to appropriate resources. You kind of mentioned that. How many times I've been in organizations, and Ed and I dealt with this. You give them broken tools. You don't give them enough time. You don't explain what needs to be done. And then you wonder why they're not performing at the level. They're standing around with their arms crossed and say, okay, tell me what to do, right?
Well, think about this.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Lift up your other two, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and then the last one of this is how do we give them opportunities for fearless feedback? You know, so that they can say something and not have their job jeopardized or have something else happen. Because basically, as you pointed out earlier, Ed, you know, when a leader is willing to take information in and use it in such a way to be able to learn, sometimes it hurts. But when it hurts, it means that people are actually giving you the information that you need to be able to improve your organization. And it sets an example for them to feel like they have this opportunity for fearless feedback. There is no danger in saying something. There is no stupid question. There only is a question that's not been asked or nobody's been willing to say something. You know, so those are the 5 principles.
Yeah. In addition to the feedback, Ray, it's really important when you're on the line and a problem develops that you have the ability to make a decision to solve the problem.
Yes.
And a lot of times people don't feel comfortable because the boss at the top, he makes all the decisions.
Right.
So they find a problem, they have to call the boss can't be reached. In the meantime, we're missing out on all kinds of opportunities.
We just lost 4 hours of productivity because somebody won't tell us. Yeah.
So the owners and the management have to feel comfortable giving their folks the ability to make decisions on the line that are necessary for taking care of the customer.
Yeah.
And within some reason, obviously, and sometimes they're going to make some mistakes, but overall, it's going to turn into a learning organization. So
right.
You're training people, but by the same token, they're going to be adding their input into the process to make it even better. And that's where you really develop that big scale of improvement for productivity.
Right. You know, and if I can say this, and then I'll let you go, Ron, but I had a CEO, and I asked him one day, I said, what is it going to take to double productivity? And he looked at me and he says, we're going to have to double the failure rate. and he meant that sincerely, you know, and the point that you made, Ed, is that he was real clear. He let people make decisions knowing sometimes it'd be a mistake. He said they learn more when they make a mistake than if we don't. And I encourage them to make mistakes because it helps us get through them and learn. So I'm sorry, Ron, I interrupted you.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that you know, one of the exit strategy considerations that we've all had and that Ed has brought forward is and of course you've talked about this for years, Ray, is that if you're still working in your business, nobody wants to buy your business.
Right.
And so the owners of businesses that would like to be able to get out from underneath them have a problem when they have to make all the decisions. In fact, what they need to do is make no decisions. Now,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that they don't have control and can't run their business, but it means also that a business needs to run itself at least to the extent to where the owner would only have to show up, say, on a weekly basis or maybe even a quarterly basis in order to participate in the financials and that sort of thing. The problem that I see in working, for 40 years with small business owners is that they don't necessarily go into business in order to make money. They go into business because they have an idea to fix a problem, or
Right.
they want a job. As you've said many times, they're not really there to build a business. They're just there to do what they know how to do. The sad part, though, is you spend 30 or 40 years of your life with this job, and you may have made enough money to have a nice retirement. And if you've owned buildings, you probably have paid them off, and you're probably doing well. But if you aren't in that situation, you get to the end of your career, and you have very little to sell. And that's because you've got a little equipment that's been completely depreciated, or it's old because you knew for the last 10 years you're going to shut down, and there's really nothing left to buy. And if you have to buy the owner who is going to leave, you don't have anything to sell anymore.
Yeah.
So that's part of the issue, which is why it's so important, I think, for the overall exit plan is that leadership has to recognize that their job is to work themselves out of a job.
Yes.
And when you finally get to that point, you've got a real business. I was fortunate enough as a young man to get a hold of that principle for another reason, because I had an interest in doing something different. I wanted to build my own house. But in order to do that, I had to work on it, 6 days a week. That meant I only had 1 day a week to run my business. I had 7 stores at the time, retail stores. But I had put systems in place to the point to where, and my motivation being, I don't want to go to work anymore because I want to build this house. And I kind of need a break from the everyday ho-hum. And so I literally spent 6 or 8 months getting everybody else ready to do everything else.
Bingo. Right.
All
right.
I did was go in. I received a 4 inches thick report every single Monday that helped me understand what I needed to do, because inventory is a big part of retail. And so I would go through that report on Tuesday. I'd make all my notes on that, distribute that to all my managers. I'd go back home, and I literally wouldn't get a call. Most weeks I'd get no call at all. And I just go back in on Tuesday and find out what had happened.
No, and see, that's such an incredibly important element.
Yeah, it's possible, but it requires a shift in thinking.
Yes.
From I have to make the decisions to I have to make the systems to make the decisions.
Right. Right.
Everybody else can, within the parameters, they can do their jobs based on what the measurements are, the known outcomes are going to be, and 80 or 90% of the kinds of things that can come up. They have to learn to do that, or you're never going to have anything to sell.
No, and I think, if I can build on that a little bit, and I think, Ed, you've probably seen the same thing. When you develop a succession plan, and basically that's what you did, Ron, you just said, look, I have other priorities. I need to be able to produce others. And what I've told people who are either in supervisory or management roles or want to get there, I said, you won't move from your position until somebody underneath you can do your position. So, and when you really help them understand that their job is not to hide or hold things, I like to call it the Texas Hold'em strategy. I'm not going to let you do what I do because you're going to take my job. Your job is to say, oh, here it is, man. I'm going to teach you everything I want to know because I want to go here. And I can't go there if I can't prove to my leadership that I can have somebody to do my job. And you've reduced it to most lifestyle jobs, which is true. 80% of all business is a lifestyle. The guy just wants to make some money, but he never developed a business. All he
Right.
did was create a glorified job, right? And nobody wants to buy it, so.
And that's one reason small business owners have so few stellar managers.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And now, Ed, because you, of all of us, you've probably had the most employees under your wings. How did you develop them so they could grow, particularly in that situation where you were losing money and then moved it into where it was making a lot of money?
Well, I think you have to sit down with them and you have to go through their operation and show them opportunities where they can do things better. And so you have to be able to measure their results and go over those measurements. And from that, they learn a lot. And then you give them some overarching goals of what if we did this? It might sound really strange and totally out of the question, but after people start analyzing these things, they say, well, maybe we can't do that, but maybe we can do this, which is a significant improvement from what we've been doing.
Right.
The one-on-one communication with your management team to make sure they understand what's going on, how they're being evaluated, and more importantly, how can they better serve the customer?
Right.
The customer is the king.
Right.
With all the bills, we have to take care of the customer.
Right.
So I think those meetings are really valuable in setting the stage on opportunities that can come up down the road. I think apathy is the worst thing when people don't seem to care, because if you're on the front line and your boss doesn't seem to care, and there's a problem, what do you think is resolved?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't care either. My boss doesn't care. The owner doesn't care. Nobody seems to care.
Right. And I'm going to get the same paycheck whether I work harder or not.
Absolutely. So the bottom line is, going through, looking for those improvements, and then by the same token, as you said, as one of your fundamentals on good leadership, is having an incentive for them.
Right.
Where they can make more money based upon the improvements that they drive to the bottom line. And I don't know why there's a reluctance by many owners to do that, but some owners don't want to do that. No. And I understand why, because it makes all the sense. If you can make $5 and pay out one in incentive, that's a good deal. You're $4 better off. And the employee who made the change has got an extra buck in his pocket.
No, and I think, one of the points you made last week in terms of our working with that client, we improved the bottom line by 8 times. Imagine how easy it is then to be able to distribute some of that to the people who made it happen and lock them in with golden handcuffs. I mean, and the work we did, was not easy work, was it, Ed? I mean, this was difficult manual labor. But where else were guys going to make $60,000 to $80,000 a year doing something and be heard? And so they had every reason to stay, and they worked hard to be able to work together. And I think that's all we're trying to say. It's not the caliber of the work as much as the integrity and the heart that goes behind it. Because if I got your mind and heart, your body will follow.
Well, I want to bring up one point, because we've been talking about rewarding the good performers for doing their job.
Yes.
Management also has to identify the slackers.
Right.
The people that aren't doing their jobs, the ones that complain just to be complaining, just to be causing problems, or being a sewer monkey behind the scene causing problems.
Right.
Those folks are taking away productivity opportunities from the organization. In addition to that, eventually, if you don't take care of them one way or another, they are going to cause you a legal issue. They're either going to file for workers' comp, and that's one of the things with COVID-19 right now. Everybody's filing for workers' comp.
Right.
So a lot of these companies had a lot of long-term employees that should have been let go a long time ago, but now they have an opportunity to file for workers' comp. It's going to cost companies a lot of money to get rid of them.
Right, and even more painful than that is the fact that everybody who works directly with them is looking at you as a leader and say, when are you going to take care of this problem? Because
Absolutely.
I can't. And when you do that, it reflects on the value of the culture and everybody else, because they're saying, I can't do it. This is your job. And as you pointed out, Ron, there are times in which we can't do anything. But one of the things we can do is we can hire and fire. And when we fail to do that, it affects the efficiency, quality, and productivity of the organization.
Yeah, I agree. Both the incentive and the kick in the butt are both valuable. If you don't fire those who are not getting the job done, then the ones who look at them who were doing the job are going to start slacking, and they're going to say, well, there's no penalty for not getting it.
Yeah.
So
Why should I work hard?
you've got to reward them with the carrot and then also use the stick occasionally. That's kind of hard for some people, but that's why you have to know and understand what performance criteria are possible,
Right.
and be realistic about that. So that means the organization has to have the infrastructure to be able to pull the numbers and do the comparisons.
Mm-hmm.
And the leadership have to have the discipline to actually use those reports on a regular basis.
Right.
That is many times the problem, is that there are so many business owners that, because they wanted to do a certain thing and they got that sort of done and achieved, they hired a few people, they don't really have the desire to be disciplined about running their company.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a solution for that. Hire somebody else to run it.
Yeah. No, exactly. And we've obviously seen cases in which the person running the organization is the wrong person to be doing that. And the question is, as a leader of an organization, a small business, if your ego is so big you cannot see that there are other people who are more valuable, that can be a killer as well. So a lot of what we've talked about is good leadership is about drawing the best out of your people. It's being able to be willing to say, I made a mistake, and to be able to model those kind of behaviors for your people, and then execute when you have to. You have to let someone go. It's just amazing how trust increases when they say, oh my God, he did it. We didn't, and many times, you have, and this happens, I'm sure you've seen it, Ron. You may have a stellar sales guy, but he's a pain in the butt. And everybody knows it. And as soon as you let him go, all the numbers start rising.
Yeah, you see that kind of thing a lot, and we in our marketing execution business, Red Fusion, we often made sure that the salespeople didn't get anywhere close to the production people. And the reason is that the salespeople are always, slapping everybody on the back. How you doing? They're doing nothing but interrupting everybody else.
Right.
So, it was like, look, you can't come to the office. We don't want you in the office. Your personality is not quiet. The people who are doing technical work, they don't want to be interrupted. They don't really, they're introverts. They don't care about the sales guys. That's why they make fun of them. And of course, those guys make fun of the guys who are the introverts doing all this detailed, fabulous detail work. Well, that's okay. Companies have to exist with different kinds of people. And that is a leadership challenge, to be able to get them all to work together and figure out where the common ground is, and put the rules in place so that people don't run over each other.
And I think
exactly how to do those rules necessarily. That's kind of your job, but I know that we tried very hard to keep them separated, and that worked very much better than letting them mingle.
now one of the things that I'm really concerned about is that good teams understand that it's the differences in the organization that make it strong, not the similarities.
Right.
And so when you start bringing them together and having them appreciate, one of the things I know your instrument helps people understand differences. I use an instrument, but the real key is to realize, that loudmouth that you think is such a pain in the butt, or the introvert is somebody who's arrogant, and is not. They bring skills to the table that this organization needs to be able to thrive and we want to be respectful of those and help each other as opposed to be judgmental and push on them, you know. And Ed and I certainly knew that, you know, the people typically who are in leadership tend to be driven people who are creative and are probably pretty short fused. That's not really uncommon, you know, so we have to give them some slack. But on the other hand, we still have to call them on the fact that, no, you can't do that. You know, you can't, you know, you have to, if you react all the time, you get people who withdraw. So, you know, the point is that all this, what we're talking about is that this whole exit planning requires a succession plan. It requires people to coordinate. It requires that people work together, because the truth is, as you pointed out earlier, unless you're willing to do that, your organization will never be more than a glorified job. But the more you're able to help people become all they were created to be in your job, the more the likelihood that your organization will become one of the top 10% in the world. And that's not a difficult thing to do if you become a good leader and start using the brains inside of your organization as opposed to judging or ignoring them. So I think that pretty much wraps us up for today. It might be helpful, if you don't mind, Ron, can you bring that back up on the screen? Because what we're trying to do is each week as we talk, we're going to be looking at these drivers and kind of helping everybody understand a little bit more about how in their small business they're going back and forth to work. They can learn from us and try to figure out what they can apply to make their business more of what they dreamed it would be instead of the nightmare that it sometimes becomes.
Well, one point I'd like to make on this driver of increasing productivity and quality is that every dollar that is saved in this effort goes one direction, and that is into the bottom line.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you can increase sales, but unfortunately, you're only going to realize maybe 30% or so.
And if your margins are thin, you're only going to receive 2 or 3%.
That's exactly right. But in this one driver area, it's why it's so important.
Right.
Is that you can have a profound impact on your bottom line, and that bottom line is going to generate a valuation for your company that's going to make it very, very valuable to somebody else down the road who can take it to the next direction. And I think the other point is I'd like to say about this is that the bottom line here is if you're running a business and you're not improving it, you might want to get ready to sell it now. Because the bottom line is if you want a business that's really going to reward you and you're going to get top dollar for, you got to be continually improving it. And this is one big driver that can have a profound impact on your business.
Right. No, and I appreciate that. For every dollar saved, it's a dollar earned.
Right. As they say.
So given what we've gone over so far, what do we want to move on as we talk next week? As we can, my hope would be we continue to go over these drivers, you know, to get deeper and deeper into them. Given what we've talked about in the last 3 weeks, which one should we be discussing next week?
I'd like to go back to top line revenue as a suggestion. And I'd like to focus on, and Ron's really in good shape to give us good feedback on this. And how do you differentiate your company from your competitors?
Okay.
And that would I think everybody's got to know what value their company provides over their competitors. How do they better solve customer opportunities in other companies?
Right.
Yeah,
that's sort of
much time on this.
That's kind of a continued conversation from our value diamond one, which is how do you use the value diamond in order to be able to differentiate? And so, sure, I think that's a great topic.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, I think on that note, I want to thank you, Ron, and Ed for participating again. I know we had a few technical challenges at the beginning, but I think this is the kind of topic that people don't really discuss all that well, and it's such an important one. You know, if you want to increase efficiency, you know, release the brains inside, create that no-collar workforce, and use it to be able to, get everybody aligned on the same page, get the relevant skills you need, create incentives for them to work, and most importantly, give them a chance for fearless feedback so you get the information you need to make better decisions and help them help you. So thank you very much. This is Ray Anderson saying goodbye on behalf of Ron Burgess and Ed Lasak. We'll see you next week.